Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach.
Ready, Freddie.
The word of the day is persnickety. Persnickety. Annie, define it for us, please.
It's you. Your persnickety.
Right by the word is a picture of Matt
Of
Harbach.
Matt, yes.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Hey, welcome.
That's a good way to start.
Matt and I are we have decided to complete the month of January dry from
Yes.
This is me
booze
clapping.
and energy drinks.
Yeah. We should go out tonight. We should get some drinks.
That's cool. I will drink Monster, and you can drink a Miller Lite. And
Oh, yuck.
So,
well, you can have any.
is there
cocktail,
any
really.
consequences for this, or is it just
Shame. Eternal shame.
Okay, shame.
Well, that's the thing, and I was saying like I'm okay, like, but it's gonna be hard because Saturday we're doing our fantasy football punishment. We're going downtown.
Yes.
You know, everybody's gonna be there.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a fun time, and I'm gonna be the designated driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
So-
fallout for me, I might fall asleep, might take more naps. Honestly, sounds great. So,
Yeah.
The mocktail industry is big.
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
I mean, would
Oh.
you like that, or do you like?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't, and that's the thing. It's the drinking thing is not. It's not about. I was thinking about it today. It's not about the substance. Like I'm not like I've got to have a drink.
Yeah.
It's the social
Right.
piece of it.
Yeah.
So the being without it is like whatever.
I just went down to Reunion
Yeah.
Oh,
Bar
yeah.
and Restaurant because thank you, by the way. Ben and Bill got me a gift card there for Christmas. I went there with a friend, and they had like all these mocktails. Really, really good.
You're supposed to say, Annie, did you get $300 to Reunion?
Oh yeah, how much did they give you?
I don't know.
Did you have a good meal, or what'd you have there?
Yeah, they have stuffed burgers. It's like a burger with like filling. So I got like the one that had like bacon on top.
Oh, yeah.
And like cream cheese
Yum.
inside of the
Sounds
burger.
great. Was it good?
First couple of bites are amazing, and after that, it just sits like a boulder right in the guts.
Yeah. Did you
It's
have a
very tasty.
mocktail?
I did, yeah.
What kind?
I don't remember what it was called. I asked the waitress. I said, "Which of these is the best?" And then she picked one. I said, "Okay, I'll take that one."
There you go.
But it's really good.
Very good. Cool. I think they have like a whole, if you have young people with you, upstairs, like a big video game kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
that
like
sort of thing.
arcade upstairs.
We've got volleyball courts.
Yeah,
Oh, I
very
didn't know
cool.
that.
All right. Annie,
Yes.
what's happening? What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I was thinking about one of my favorite classes in college, which was an ethics class, and we talked about all kinds of ethical systems, and something stood out to me that I just really remember, and I don't know why I started thinking about it, but I did, and the subject being, it is okay to lie to someone if they expect that you are going to lie to them.
What?
That was part of, I can't remember
Because
which,
the big question is it okay to lie?
Right. So is it ever? So that that led me to I was thinking about that, and then that led me to say, is it really ever okay to lie, and under what circumstances, and is there a universal rule that we could make that says, it's okay to lie in this scenario or that scenario, or is it based on the other person or the other entity or whatever? So, I was thinking about a time when I was like 13 and I walked to school, middle school, and it was about 6 blocks, and I had a friend and we would walk together, and we were coming home one day and we were approached by a guy who's probably at least 20, give or take. And we're in a residential area, and he says, he's all frantic, and he says, can you guys come help me? My girlfriend and I are fighting at this house. And he's pointing like 5 houses down the street, and then he's all frantic, and I'm like, what? And so I lied, and I said, I have a dentist appointment. My mom is waiting for me.
Yeah.
In other words, letting him know if I don't come home, somebody's coming to look for me.
Yeah.
So I lied through
How
my
old were you again?
13.
Okay.
So I was like, whatever. And so I lied.
Yeah.
And I feel like, had we gone to that house, I'd probably not be here.
Yeah.
So is it okay to lie, and when? And, you know, I mean, this guy obviously
Probably
sinister.
lied to you.
Well, that's right. So it's on the other is it on the other person or entity? I mean, we could take that as far as, you know, okay, well, I'm going to lie about my taxes because the IRS, you know, is
They're crooks. All taxation is theft.
but that's my point, is like, is there a universal rule that we could say, like, well, I'm going to lie to this organization or this person or whatever because they're flawed? Is that an okay universal rule?
Yeah.
Or
I think that's really hard, right? Because you just go by the 10 commandments and how they're repeated in the New Testament. It talks about not giving false testimony against your neighbor. It doesn't say do not lie. And the same thing kind of when it talks about taking a life, you shall not murder. It doesn't say you shall not kill, and murder and killing are two different things. Before we started the podcast, I was thinking of, when you brought this up, the Egyptian midwives in the story in the first chapters of Exodus, where Pharaoh sees that the Hebrew people are growing fast and he's getting intimidated and scared of them and they're growing so fast. And so he makes this decree that when a Hebrew boy is born, they're supposed to kill the Hebrew boy right away. And that's what the midwives were commanded to do. And then they lie and they say, oh, these Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They have these babies so fast before we can't even get there in time. And God actually blessed them with their own children. It says in the text that they were blessed in their lives for lying.
so maybe if you're protecting life, then is it okay to lie? You know, because I feel like in my case, it was
Definitely protecting life there, right?
you know, and then in this case too. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a hard and fast
So
rule.
often, whenever Jesus talks about ethics, he doesn't lay like clear scenarios down. He talks so much about the heart, what's going on the inside. That's why he says, you know, you've heard it said, and your teachers say you shall not commit adultery, but I tell you, you shall not lust after a woman. And the point is not that lusting is the same as committing adultery in the sense, but the point is, I care more about your heart and where is that going, and what direction are you leading, and how, what's really going on in your heart. And what's going on in your heart in that moment is, this guy's scum. I need to figure out a way to get out of this. That's what's going in your heart, and that's not a bad thing. What's going on in his heart, if what
Who knows?
you know, if who knows how that was all playing out, but it seems like very wicked and evil things. I think it gets even more dicey when it comes to corrupt governments and corrupt situations. You know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a famous Lutheran pastor who when he started to see how wicked the Nazi government was, and he started to come awake to this, he became basically a spy and tried to actively assassinate Hitler and got part of that. And he talks about that a lot in his writings. And then another one is Corrie ten Boom, and she same era, same situation, and she's a Christian woman, I think from Denmark, and she was hiding Jews in her house and wrote a book called The Hiding Place. And so you don't want to just say the end justifies the means, but I think it's a lot about the heart. What are your motives? Where's it coming from? Why are you doing this? And it's a case by case. If you're lying on your taxes just because you don't want to pay them and you don't like that they're taking it, that's
I mean, we could
thing.
maybe argue that it's
Yeah.
an egregious, that they are, exploiting us a little bit, maybe. But and does that give?
Right.
Are you justified in doing that? I also think people, it's difficult to say just take it on a case by case basis, because, I mean, we've seen some people, particularly recently, who are not reasonable people,
Right.
and who really should not be allowed to discern,
Right.
because they can't.
Right. Yep. There's another opposite side of this in the New Testament, right? As the early church was starting, the famous Ananias and Sapphira, they saw that lots of people in the early church were selling all their property, and they were kind of becoming well known for being so generous to the church. Like Barnabas and others were selling all their property, giving it to the church, and letting the church distribute it how they wanted. And so Ananias and Sapphira sold a bunch of their property and said, here's all the money for our property, except they held a bunch back. And they gave the impression that they were more generous than they were. They were lying about that. And they fell dead. They fell dead, and there was an immediate punishment for what they were doing in their heart. And it seems like a small white lie. What's the big deal? But again, I think it goes back to the heart. What are your intentions? For you to tell the story, there's no remorse there, right? You can tell that, hey, this is the situation. This is what would happen. I have no remorse. I have no...
No, I would do it again 100 times over.
Exactly. That shows your heart is in the right place. But if you can't tell this openly and honestly after the situation to trustworthy people, I think that's a telltale sign that there's something wrong in your heart when you did that, when you're lying. So I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
What about cases that are a lot less extreme? Because most people would lie to get out of like a life-threatening situation. I think that's fine.
Right.
What about like something really kind of seemingly harmless, where you're talking about like I might hurt somebody's feelings? I had a friend ask me, like, she's just like, what do you do? Like, someone came up to me and they were like, their band wrote a song or something, and they're like, oh, what do you think of this? And she's like, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Like, what do I say? Something small like that, where it's not life or death, but.
Right. I think those are, that's tricky. Is there a way to.
That's framing. That's how you frame
right.
your answer.
Can you Oreo cookie it? Where you I like that you're trying. There's room for improvement.
Killer.
And can I help you out with, or I don't know, like you start with something positive.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the reality, and then you end with something.
Yeah.
That is hard, the tact.
But would you lie? But let's say it's someone you don't know very well.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of looking for some positivity or whatever. I mean, and you're not going to sit them down and be like, hey, look, as a friend, because you're not a friend.
Right.
You happen to be there. Oh, what do you think? You're like, it's good.
Yeah, but that's a case of, I think that's subjective, right? So like, there's no objective, like you wouldn't, how do I say it? Like if a woman says, does this make me look fat? We could objectively say, like, this makes you look fat, and maybe you could try a different style. Like, this would be better.
Do I have permission to use that as a response?
No.
Yes.
No.
First of all, if you're a woman, just don't ask that question if you don't want an answer.
See,
I mean, flat out, don't even ask it.
But is it okay to lie?
I don't think you have to lie in that situation.
No,
in the music situation.
But many people would. No. What I would do is I would try to find something I liked about it and just say, oh, I really liked what that
this
one
lyric
thing was.
Or that,
But someone says, like, do you like it? And you're like, I don't know you. I don't want to hurt your feelings.
I mean, I have to do it all the time with you and your songs. Kidding. I think you're brilliant.
Oh, gee.
It's interesting too that this is not only an ethical thing, but it's a cultural thing. In some cultures, honor shame culture, you would never shame somebody in that situation. You would do everything you could to approve of them, because what's most valued in that culture is their honor. And so...
Or the context of, instead of just a direct, this is not good, reading the context of the response. Yeah, I don't know.
Right. Well, I think the best response is obviously to be honest. But is it okay to lie? That's the question.
That's really tough. Yeah.
How would you lie, Pastor Ben? If you went to, I'm trying to think of a scenario, but it's someone's feelings are at stake.
Yeah.
Right?
I think I tend to be a people pleaser. And so it's easier, I think, for me to try to find a way to not hurt their feelings.
Right.
The consequences there, or my heart there, all that seems different to me than... now we're talking about, hurting their feelings or not, or all those kinds of things. It's not, but I was thinking of other cases where people have, they'll say, I'm good with God. I confess my sin to God, but I'm not going to be honest with another human being. I don't, because of legal problems, or because of, I'm not going to be totally honest about everything. And these little, it's not that, it seems like I've already been honest with God, these little white lies, these kinds of things. I think those ethical things that are going to hurt your soul, I'm trying to, saving face and trying to, but at the end of the day, too, it's not good for this person's future if a bunch of people say, you're a great singer, and then you try out for American Idol, and you're like,
Right.
finally Simon
best.
Cowell tells you, did no
No.
one tell you were not any good?
Well, see, and I guess that's my question. Is the person asking for an opinion like from a technical standpoint or from like a subjective, like,
Do you like
do you like this song? Mm-hmm. So what are you from a technical side? Like,
I mean, here's the scenario. Okay, so Pastor Ben, your daughter's in the school play. You go to the play, and one of her friends says, like, oh, hey, it's Shelby's dad. Like, did you like it?
Like
Or,
my part?
Or like, yeah, like, oh, how do you think we did?
Yeah.
And
Well-
and what you think is that she did a very bad job.
That would be a hard one. I think in the moment to say what you would say in that moment. I think, is there a way to say it in a longer conversation? Like, you have other gifts.
We need to talk.
Yeah, you have other gifts. Because everybody is a genius at something.
agreed.
And it's really tragic when people waste their time on something that
Just ain't it.
that ain't
Yeah.
it. That ain't it. Move on. So I think there's a couple of things at play there. The culturally appropriate thing to say in that moment to not hurt somebody's feelings, and then the, hey, I'm your mentor, I'm a friend, I'm a father figure, your father. Hey, let's go in a different direction. You've tried this, it's not working out. So I think those are two different things.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah,
It's kind of like when somebody says, how you doing? And it's just a casual greeting.
See, that drives me crazy. You can't ask a question as a greeting because I don't know if you want me to respond or not. Like, I've had people walk past
do
me like,
both.
hey, Matt, how's it going? And before I can eat, they're already down the hall. It's like, oh,
Right.
so you didn't want an answer. So just say hi.
But what I mean, like in that situation, what we normally say, oh, good, things are fine.
Yeah.
If somebody then pours out everything and you don't even know
Sometimes
that
they do.
person, right? And but there's another time for that, right? Like this in a casual walking past somebody in the hallway.
Yeah.
At
That's
the grocery
probably not.
store, the cashier.
But if you ask the question, you
Sure.
ask for the answer.
Sure, that's true. Yeah. I just would, if somebody is really going through a hard time, let's set up a time. Let's go through that. Let's try to find a way to help you. Yeah, I think we need to get somebody who's got a philosophy major in ethics, to tell us how to deal with all these situations. But I think there is a difference between culturally appropriate and spiritually harmful. This is physically and spiritually harmful for you, and then, hey, you don't really want to get into this right now. You're just asking me a question and a quick opinion. I think that's different. Where's your heart? That's what I would keep asking. Guard your heart.
All right.
But obviously, very thankful you lied in that situation.
Yeah.
Glad
it's
you're.
just weird.
Yeah, it's really sad. The
What a
wickedness
creepy
that's
dude.
out there,
Yeah.
and when you're
Well,
dealing
and
with
honestly, what am I gonna do? Like, what is a 13-year-old girl gonna do for you and your feuding?
which is
it's like-
you
Okay,
could tell
what
they
if-
were lying.
Let's sit this down.
Yeah,
All
what am I
now-
gonna
now
do for
We're not
you?
going to say anything. We're just going to listen for 5 minutes.
So dumb.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
Right, which you had kind of your you knew something was icky there.
Spidey sense.
Yeah, that was
for sure.
Her
So-
purple hair was tingling.
I think we need to teach and you said you teach your kids this, where, all right, be wise. And here's something I think I've said in the podcast before. I mean, I just love Jesus. When he says, be as shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. And he's talking about the Pharisees. And they would ask him questions that they didn't really want the answer to, but they were trying to trick him. and he would, I think it's basically 100% of the time, respond with another question. Like, are you from God? And he'd say, I don't know. What did you think John the Baptist was from God? And he would ask another question because he wasn't going to play their game. So I think that's another way to go. If you know that they're playing games, don't get caught up in their games. So, all right. Anything else?
I'm good.
Okay. The topic I want to talk about, we're kind of breaching this a little bit in our sermon series right now, but influencers. Now it's a huge industry right now where you have influencers in the wellness movement, in financial influencers. A lot of it is like success influencers, like help you to start your business. There's all sorts of online classes you can take that people put on, influencers on social media. So first of all, some of them that aren't there anymore, but they were there. We've mentioned this before. Rachel Hollis or Jen Hatmaker. I think she's still there. Annie Downs. I think these are some of the ones. I know Ed Milet is another one. Somebody mentioned there's some weird ones out there that are like totally vain. And
who are the people that you just mentioned? I know
most of them are
Hollis.
Christian. Rachel Hollis, she started with like kind of their book Girl Wash Your Face.
Yeah, but then she got ousted.
Yeah,
right? Like, I don't
her
know.
character. A lot of times too, you can get a big audience right now because how quickly things can grow, because of the digital revolution. But your character doesn't match
away.
up with your, it doesn't line up with your influence. So I guess my question, first of all, is, are there any that you guys follow? Is there a person that you look to that you find helpful? Is there anything about some of these influencers that rub you the wrong way? Jordan Peterson, we've mentioned on the podcast before. He's one of them. I think any of these podcasters, Joe Rogan and Jocko, Annie Beege, she's an influencer.
Next level.
It's in one way, it's not new. Socrates had his students that followed him. Jesus had his disciples that followed him. It's not a new thing. What makes it new, I think, is that you can be behind a screen. Your life can be totally different. Like, Rachel Hollis and her husband were having these marriage conferences that you had to pay thousands of dollars to go to, and then their marriage is crumbling behind the scenes. So you can project an image and people aren't close enough to see what's really going on. That's one issue. And just how quickly you can scale with almost no money. How many people you can reach. And so, what do you guys think about this? Are there any you follow? Are there any you look up to? Is there anything that you like about it? Anything that rubs you the wrong way?
As a kind of a side note, this reminds me of my favorite Christmas movie, Christmas in Connecticut.
Yes.
And kind of the premise is there's a woman who writes for, Better Homes and Gardens or whatever. This is set back in the 40s. And she's writing about her lavish farm that she lives on with her new baby and her husband. She's cooking all these beautiful, wonderful meals. And then they pan to her and she's a single woman living in New York City in a small 1-bedroom apartment, but she's writing for this countrywide magazine, and just not, just being an influencer in the domestic sense. But, so it just reminds me of that. But what are we talking about? Like influencers of like substantial things? Or are we talking about like fashion or anything really?
Anything.
Makeup,
Yeah.
anything?
Yeah. I think there's a big thing is all the, home remodeling TV shows and all that's out there right now, where you have Joanna Gaines and Chip Gaines and that huge empire that they have, and personal branding basically, where a human becomes a brand, and we follow everything they do, and they get known for maybe one thing, and then we follow them for everything, and we look to these people that maybe in the past we would look to a teacher or a parent or a family member, a friend to kind of influence us. And now we're looking to all these different gurus. I think some of the danger is you don't really need any credentials.
Right.
You have your own experience, and so there can be a temptation there to maybe speak to freely or give the impression that you know what you're talking about, and some do, but some don't. They don't have the credentials. So that's one thing. I already mentioned the character thing. I also think sometimes it can lead to unrealistic expectations. Like how many things can you follow? How many to-do lists can you check off? I mean, how many different? There are so many things that I've tried out, and like some things work and some things don't, and you find out what's really, not even the people who are promoting this even follow some of their own advice. So, yeah, what do you think, Matt? Do you have any? Do you listen to Jordan Peterson or any of those kind of different people? Are there influencers that are influencing you?
I don't listen to. I have listened to some like specific things from Jordan Peterson. I don't listen to him all the time. I mean, I think most of what he says, I think is really sharp, and so I appreciate it. I don't know. I don't religiously follow like anyone who's influencing like thought or like morality, ethics, or stuff like that. I mean, Jesus, of course. But as far as like like influencers who are like trying to like get you to like get your whole life together, something like that, I mean, not really.
Okay.
I don't, sometimes I'll get into one for a little bit and I'll see a couple of videos and it's like, all right, I get the point.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they just repeat themselves in every video.
Yeah.
Or they'll just start talking about other stuff and it doesn't really seem like they know as much about.
Right.
So
in many ways, I think it can be really helpful if you have if you're depressed or anxious or, you can't get going and these people have had success in one area of their life and they share their story and show tips as to how as long as they're being honest, I think it could be very helpful. But I think the character issue, I've had a lot of pastors that I followed. I think they'd be called influencers. They were writers and podcasters and, preach sermons that kind of got outside of their own church influence. But as they got bigger, their character did not match up with their influence. And, man, that's just such a burden. That's why and they were all men. I think many of the women who are in this economic space or in this are very successful and not like men are going to automatically be an issue and women are always going to be right. But it's interesting that all the women that I know, except for Rachel Hollis is one example, I guess, have stuck it out and they've continued to be able to have these ministries and these leading these groups of people where sometimes the guys get caught up in scandals. It seems like quicker. I know more men who've got caught up in scandals than women. So it's a crazy new world. I feel like every new piece of technology creates a new world. And I'm thinking about even myself, like, all right, we got this whole digital studio. We have this podcast. Are we supposed to, and me as a pastor, supposed to try to reach more people outside of this? How much it is a personal brand? How much is it in Victory's name? And all those kinds of things. So these are things that I'm trying to work through also myself. But I think I'm going to plan on mentioning this in the sermon this weekend. I don't think we can comprehend what the printing press did 500 years ago to change the world. Up until that time, for thousands of years, people were handwriting, chiseling out symbols and words, and then there was scribes that had to write every single word, and there was no ability to mass produce anything. And then Gutenberg figured out how to take little metal letters that you forged, and then you put them in these slots, and then you could have a sheet of paper that you could press 1,000 times and create all of a sudden the Bible is scalable. And Martin Luther, he really took advantage, as people say, that if it wasn't for the printing press, there would be no Martin Luther. There would be no Reformation, because his writings, his 95 Theses, his small catechism, his translation of the Bible spread. And I don't know if this is true, but like what was publicized by him is still, we still haven't caught up. There still isn't other writings that have been published as much as his, but I don't know if that's true. And I've heard that is true. I don't know if that's true or not, but it really did change the world, change education, changed access to information. So that was the printing revolution. Think about the digital revolution. Now we're not paying a printer to print our stuff. You can publish videos and put it out for the world, and anybody can do that. And then you have that temptation to make it all about yourself, or you have the opportunity to bless people or serve people. And so I'm trying to work all this out. Is this a good thing, a bad thing? Is it worthy of our time? Is it what we should be buying into? Is it helpful or not? So.
Yeah, I think I don't know that there's anybody that I follow like on TikTok or anything for, that type of life advice. I think it's, sure. I'm more, I like people who buy a lot of stuff on Amazon and then they review it.
Okay.
So that I don't have to.
Right.
We bought this product and here's, so things like that you can be an influencer that way.
Right.
And even make some money, maybe from Amazon or whatever. So there's influencers, on different levels, I think.
TikTok is kind of a faceless platform, right? I mean, it's not. You're watching, and then you're watching videos, and you're not necessarily. They're so fast, and there's so many of them. You're not necessarily like on YouTube videos or podcasts. You're really diving deep into one person. You're following this person. But on TikTok, the algorithm is just shooting tons of stuff at you from all these different places, right? That you're not necessarily grabbing onto one person, are you?
You can. So
okay.
you can like follow
okay.
Accounts on TikTok. Yeah, and I mean I've got a handful. Some are just so outrageous. I follow them just for sheerly like it's a train wreck, and there's something fascinating about it.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't know.
Yep. Well, I'm going to keep thinking about it. It's a new world. It's a new way to communicate with people. And like I said, there's some that I really have found helpful. We talk about the Carey Nieuwhof podcast and some of the stuff he talks about when it comes to church and leadership. I found helpful. And there are a handful of others that I will try to listen to everything that they have to say. But it also is that, again, I've been burned so many times, it's hard to really buy into a person that you don't know personally and you can't check up what's going on in their daily life. Like, you're saying a lot of great stuff, but does your life match it,
Well, if you ever make it big, I'm here to keep you humble, to keep you grounded.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any issue with that. I don't think anyone's going big here.
Dang. I also think that some influencers are, at least on TikTok, can be really detrimental. There's like people will do like a day in the life of, and they'll like take a day in the life of themselves.
Sure.
And it's usually like some gorgeous, thin blonde girl whose dad probably honestly pays for everything for her.
Sure.
So she's going about her day and she wakes up and she does her exercises and she makes her smoothie and she makes her bed and then she decides to take the dog for a walk, and then she comes home and does a little bit of work, like they just like show her opening the computer and like typing a few words, and then and then it's like okay, and then lunch, and then it's like it's just so unrealistic. Like, it's not somebody going to work for like 8 hours,
right?
You know what I mean, or even 4 hours. It's like the work piece of their day is a half an hour.
Right.
Them editing the video you're watching now.
Right. Exactly. Right. And I'm like, real people don't live like this, right? Like this is not reality. And if people are to aspire to this, like you look so put together because hopefully people aren't aspiring or thinking that this is an actual thing that you could do
right
without a rich dad.
And I guess that's one of concerns I have too is you can consume a ton of information that can be helpful, and they're trying to be helpful. You can also be consumed by that, feeling my life stinks,
inadequate,
or you get obsessed with somebody and you're not doing the work. You're not doing anything helpful. You're not creating anything new yourself. You're not. You could be creating music or art or helping somebody or doing something valuable, but you're on the sidelines watching somebody else's life. And I think that's another danger, is a lot of this has made us spectators instead of creators. And so how can you be a creator? So yeah, that's another challenge. Okay. Very good. Thank you. I will keep talking about this and be interested if anyone has any thoughts on people you follow, things that you find helpful. What kind of criteria do you have when you start following somebody, or things that... One final thing. I think the people I appreciate the most are really skilled at what they do, and they're trying to be helpful. The people who just want to make a name for themselves, you can kind of see right away. And I guess those people you don't get very far anyways, because it can kind of get nauseating. So, yeah. If you're helpful, you probably can help a lot of people, and it's a pretty big platform to do that. Mateo,
all right,
díganos.
We're going to talk about hell.
Okay.
So I questions about heaven and hell, and I was just thinking, like, whenever I picture hell, I always picture like the cartoon, like it's red. There's fire in the background, and there's like a red guy with horns, with like a pitchfork.
Sure.
And then heaven is like it's in the clouds, and there's like a big, like wall or like a gate, and there's like stair steps or something like that. And so my question is, what about heaven and hell is biblical, and what's popular culture?
That's good. That's a good question. So if you just read the Bible naturally, you're going to read a long time before you see anything that says hell. You're going to read in the Psalms about judgment. Even right away in Genesis, you're going to hear about that the day you eat of this tree, you will surely die. Like that's going to happen. You're going to now experience death. In the Old Testament, the word for where you go when you die is Sheol, and this Sheol is just, some people say hell, but even believers go there and they rest with their fathers. It's kind of a general word for where you go when you die in the Old Testament. The book of Isaiah gets a little bit clearer, that at the end of the book of Isaiah, it talks about in the renewed world and new heavens and new earth after the resurrection. Right at Isaiah 66, it talks about how God's people will look down on those who are suffering punishment as a sense of hope and vindication for being suffering injustice from some of these very corrupt governments that had controlled them for decades, like the Babylonians and others. And so hell was actually a kind of like justice, like vindication. This was not something to be scared of, but something to celebrate, because, almost in Isaiah, one of the blessings of the resurrection is the vindication and the justice that they received. Jesus is the one who probably speaks about it the most, and it's not talking about it all the time, but he does talk about it as a place of gnashing of teeth, and he probably the clearest one is it Matthew 24 or 25, where you have the parable. It's not really a parable, but the last day and day of judgment, the separating the sheep and the goats, and he says that those on his left will go to hell that was prepared for the devil and his angels. It wasn't prepared for people. It almost makes that idea. And then he will say to those on his right, "Go, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance that was prepared for you from the creation of the world." So God has prepared blessing for humans. Never wanted anyone to go to hell, but those who go there because of their own decisions. I'm glad you brought this up because I think this is a huge misunderstanding. I think lots of ideas, I think that cartoon nature of heaven and hell comes more from Plato and Dante's Inferno and some of these other things so Greek ideas and extra biblical ideas and medieval ideas of using hell and purgatory as a way to create more money for the church through indulgences and that kind of. And so a lot of Martin Luther was responding to that kind of thing, the medieval view of hell. And I know hell is a big subject that I think many people have left the Christian faith because of that, because of especially some of the emphasis, especially coming out of the Reformation, on hell, because that was a huge topic in the medieval church. Finally, what I see from beginning to end, the focus of the Bible, if you were to line up all the passages on this, is the resurrection of our bodies and the resurrection of the world. Isaiah, Job, Ezekiel, just even the pattern of all the minor prophets, Jesus teaching, 2 Peter, I go on and on, Romans 8 about the world in bondage to decay and being liberated from its bondage. And then finally, the last 2 chapters of the Bible, the focus is on the resurrection, that God made a good world. This good world has been tainted by sin. God is not just going to crumble it up and throw it in the trash as if the devil won. God is going to remake this world, resurrect our bodies, and all the things that were wrong, have gone wrong, are going to be made right. And that's, I think, what Jesus came to do, was to renew all things. And he even says that when he talks about Judgment Day, he says, at the renewal of all things. Now, as far as the particulars of hell, again, we have 1 or 2 verses from Jesus. And I don't know what we're supposed to do with those, how far we should take those. And it seemed like the medieval church really got excited about it in its art,
right,
and its preaching, and zeroed in on those 2 verses almost to the exclusion of the others. But I do think there's a real hell. I do think God's judgment is just. And if there wasn't, Hitler got away with it. Stalin got away with it. I heard Pastor Timothy Keller say, if there's no eternal consequences, life is actually meaningless. Like, if you can do whatever you want and get away with anything. So those are a bunch of random thoughts on heaven and hell.
I don't know, have you guys heard any interesting theories, or not necessarily theories, but like objections to teachings about heaven and hell? Or, if as you're talking to people and you say, oh, you're Christian, I mean, have you heard anybody say anything like, oh, hell, you can't believe that, or that's
why would a loving God send people to hell?
Mm-hmm.
That's one.
Yeah.
You mean like that?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that is one. Yeah.
Right.
It's a fair question.
Right. I agree with that's a really hard question, especially when we start with the assumption that people are basically good and everything's basically good. And for the most part, I feel like we live in a pretty comfortable community. We're not facing extremes of injustice, that I can see in front of me. Those of us in our community who've suffered abuse, you talked about that snare already in this podcast. What if you didn't lie in that situation? What is the vindication and the justification for a person like that who makes those kind of lies and harms children or whatever without remorse? You go to the courtroom, and if a judge doesn't lay down a just punishment for somebody that is corrupt, there is a sense in us that says there needs to be justice. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. We have tried to erase hell, and yet we've turned hell on earth. We've canceled people. We've tried to bring. So Paul says, love your enemy, pray for those who persecute you, leave room for God's justice. And I think because we haven't left room for God's justice, because we don't believe in a final justice now, we feel like we have to right all wrongs in this moment.
Yes.
And so I think there's a consequence for us trying to erase hell. And I get it. I think that is a legitimate. I know people who've left the faith because of it. I can see why somebody would. There's parts of it that I really struggle with. So it's not a cut and dry answer. It's not an easy answer.
Yeah, I was thinking one thing I've heard too is people. It's so hard to just fathom. It's like, where do you get that idea? Like that there's an afterlife, this eternal afterlife. And I think part of the problem is like when people think of hell, they think of it as a place. It's like a fiery pit where there's like demons going around torturing people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's a cartoon.
Right. And it's Dante's Inferno and pagan, I think even most pagan, there's something about even the natural knowledge of God found in most belief systems that have some kind of final judgment, because I think there is something inside of us that says this is not it. There has to be some justice. And I think that comes from our conscience. I think that comes from our natural knowledge. And I think that's why almost all religions and even worldviews has some kind of final judgment.
Yeah. But I know people have problems with the believability.
Sure. And the biblical view of hell, from especially really clear in Revelation, is not that the devil and his demons are the wardens and the torturers, but they're the prisoners. Mm-hmm. That hell, again, like Jesus said, it was made for the devil and his angels, where they will be inmates and no longer able to harm us anymore. And that's, again, where heaven is, the renewed world is pictured as a city with the gates always open, because you don't have to lock your car anymore. You don't have to lock your doors anymore. The gates are always open because the gates of hell are shut and they can't get out and harm you anymore. And so I think for the most part, except maybe you could look at Matthew 25, the sheep and the goats, 24, 25, whatever it is. That's the only one I can think of. Maybe the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, poor Lazarus, as kind of a warning of watch out. You don't want to go to hell yourself. But there's so much in the Bible that hell is, again, a picture of it gives peace to the victim, that those people who hurt you are not going to be able to touch you anymore. They're not going to. You're going to get justice.
Okay, another question then. Do you know where the teaching of purgatory comes from?
I think some of it comes from an intertestamental Jewish, from the Maccabees. I think there's some things written in between the last book of the Old Testament and the New Testament, that 400 years of silence, where, this is off the top of my head, I haven't looked at this in a long time, but I think it has something to do with.
Does someone have a phone? You want to try to look up where
the origin of purgatory?
Yeah, because I just like,
and I think it's a mixture of Greek mythology, Jewish intertestamental writings.
They mentioned the purgatory of Catholic doctrine.
Yeah, that's the one.
Has ancient roots. Medieval.
So it really came to light in again, it was used as a means of guilt, and you have to kind of work your way out of purgatory, and indulgences will kind of speed you through that. So
they call it celestial Hades.
Mm-hmm. Where you have to kind of finish the work of your life. So Yeah. So here it says, originally it came to worldwide practice for caring for the dead and praying for them, and to the belief found in Judaism, which is considered the precursor of Christianity, a prayer for the dead. And I think that's what's, there's a praying for the dead that was intertestamental writings, that there was kind of this praying for the dead, and then that led, kind of morphed into this place where they're still in kind of a intermediate state before they finish paying off their debt, before they enter into heaven.
Huh.
So appears in the writings of Plato and Heracles, and then other pagan writers. So it's not necessarily a Christian idea; it's a mixture of Greek mythology
and then became a formal Roman Catholic teaching in the late 11th century.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Weird. Because I've seen you see a Catholic priest or something will draw a little bit of scripture here and there, and I was like, I still don't get it. Like, I don't know how you're getting that whole doctrine from a couple verses. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it's not necessarily, it's not biblical. I don't know how you find that in biblical teaching.
Not our Bible.
Yeah, I think in the Catholic Bible. Now, I don't know. I don't know. The Catholic Church is so big, and there's so much variety, I think, inside the Catholic Church on a lot of these ideas. I'd be interested to hear what a Catholic priest would say. I don't want to speak for them. But as far as the origins, I think there is pretty clear to be traced back to extra biblical sources. Okay. And a lot of that is Greek mythology mixed with some Judaism, mixed with some Christianity. And then by the time the 11th century comes around, which is really when I think the reformers would say this is when the Catholic Church really started to promote work righteousness, indulgences, and a need for a reformation. They would point to that period.
Okay.
I think I don't want to throw out. I think that's Pope Gregory, when it kind of started to really get off the rails.
7th, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'd have to look that up.
Well, I know that kind of the foundations of penance came very quickly in the first couple of centuries, though, because so many people apostatized during the persecution, and so then the people who kind of remained faithful to the faith were like, well, what should they have to do before we kind of let them back into the church? Because they were trying to escape persecutions, and they sort of gave up Christianity for the time. And so, yeah, it kind of spiraled out of control.
Yeah, Pope Gregory was 600 AD, but then, I think it just kind of started to spiral.
Okay.
Yeah, I am not a church historian in that sense, but I think that it definitely wasn't an early Christian doctrine that came clearly. It's not in the Apostles' Creed. It's not in the Nicene Creed. It's not in the Athanasian Creed. It's not in the early church documents. They did not see that coming out of Scripture. Pretty clear. There's two places. There's a resurrection of the body and the life of the world to come. Not an intermediator state.
Well, with and just the kind of the pictures of heaven and hell that we all kind of have in our minds, I was just thinking it's probably just more useful because it's really easy to just ridicule that cartoony kind of oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the word.
Far Side kind of cartoons.
Sure.
Yeah.
But when we say when I die I want to go to heaven. It's well, you want to be with God.
Right, and that's about all it says in the Bible. When Paul
go to the cloud palace.
Right. There's there's really not much there about cloud or anything like that. Heaven, the Hebrew word for heaven and sky is the same word, but it is used to kind of God's space, whatever that is. But when the only thing we have about going to heaven, I mean, Paul just says in Philippians chapter 1, he says, when I die, I will depart and be with Christ, which is better by far.
Yeah.
I don't think you have any verse in the Bible that says, I'm going to heaven when I die.
Well, when Christ ascends, though, like he ascends up into the clouds. So maybe that's where it kind of comes from too.
He ascends and he's covered by a cloud.
We say he ascended into heaven.
Right. And that would be kind of the place of God, whatever that.
Yeah.
And I think that's another one of the confusion, because the heaven and God, space and sky are the same word.
And that's medieval too, because they had a really weird galaxy, like our galaxy model, with the little balls that spin around each other. There's the earth, and then there's the sky,
the dome on top of it,
and it's all these rings. It's like, then there's the moon, and there's the stars, and that's where you get the idea of like the heavens, like it's these layers, and the angels live way up there, and then God is way up there on top,
right?
And then hell is like at this, like down underground,
The center of the earth.
yeah,
Right.
It's like this horrible place.
It's interesting that it's kind of popular right now to have a multiverse kind of idea, that there's other dimensions out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's more closely what it is. There's another dimension.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, just the way we talk about it, maybe there's a better, more specific way.
Yeah.
Just so that you're not playing into like, oh, go to hell, like you're going to that fiery dungeon.
I don't think it's helpful to talk about too much that's outside.
Right.
God made this world. It's created.
Mm-hmm.
He made us. He's not done with it. And sometimes when people say this world is, all bad and everything's bad about this world and all material is bad, like that's a very Platonic idea. Plato looked at the world and material as a bad thing, and the goal of life was to kind of escape the material world. And maybe a caricature, I'm not a scholar on Buddhism, but there's a kind of this idea of maybe it's a caricature of Buddhism, but like extinguishing all desire. So no desire for anything, then you won't have setbacks. The Christian view is that God made the world, and the world is good. And yes, we've ruined it and tarnished it, but he's not done with the world. And so this world that God made, he's going to renew this world. And he's the one who, I love nature. I love the human body and all these incredible things that he designed. Sometimes I've described it as like a Titanic view of the world. Sometimes we look at the world like, oh, it's all bad. And just like the Titanic went down, we're going down. And so we might as well jump to the life raft and float away to heaven somewhere. God made this world. We should enjoy this world. And he's going to make this world 2.0. There's not something else out there that we should be looking to escape this world. Let's get our hands dirty and participate in the ruling over this world, like it says on the first page of the Bible. So that one of my, I think, desires as a pastor is to clear up some of these misunderstandings in medieval and Greek intrusions into the Christian faith.
It's kind of funny how we still hang on to those.
It is, and it's interesting how you hear maybe some pastors or people preach on it, and they say things, but it's not coming directly out of the text. Because if you would preach the text, you would not find those kind of Greek ideas in the text. So, preach the word. Be even if the word of God messes with your categories. And I'm sure there's things that the medieval church got wrong. I'm sure there's things that our modern church is getting wrong too, that we're missing some things on how the Bible is portraying them and what the reality of the world and science and all these things are. And so 500 years from now, if God has allowed us to stick around, they'll probably look back on our era and say how messed up we were in some areas.
Right.
So it's not like all medieval theology was wrong. They did get a lot of things right, and I think Luther got a lot of things right. But I think this heaven and hell and purgatory it's taken a long time to clean up, and it's still holding on, like you said, holding on to these misunderstandings. And it makes Christians just want to escape. Sometimes they don't see the value in getting their hands dirty in this world because they're so focused on escaping this world. And I don't think that is biblical or helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That clear everything up?
Interesting.
Problem solved.
As always.
All right. For those of you that missed it, that word was persnickety. Persnickety.
Matthew Harbach. If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name, Hello.